Hello everyone, my name is McKay Ballstead, and my presentation is called Becoming Like God. This comes from the Unit 8 section, and the Unit 8 Nauvoo portion, and the major concept comes from the King Follett sermon. The doctrine of we can become like God is a doctrine I classify as core. It's because very often taught in the church, a lot of talks about it. There's plenty of references in the scriptures and all the standard works, and we teach it in Sunday school, so it is pretty core to our doctrine. Two academic sources I picked are Becoming Like God by Nelson, Hales, Grow, Ashton, and Craig. Talks about the basics of becoming like God. And the second source I took was called Mother in Heaven. And this is a really interesting read because it's so rare for us to learn more about our other parent in heaven. And this comes from Holland and Christofferson as well as Hales. The two prophetic talks that I chose are Salvation and Exaltation by Russell M. Nelson. Talking about the differences between salvation and exaltation, talking about how everyone receives the gift of resurrection, but how we can be freed from spiritual death, and also exalted through righteousness. And this is Life Eternal by E. Scott Grow, who talks about getting to know God better and how it changes us. Let me just make sure I don't skip over anything. Okay, I'm going to read my Doctrine and Covenants verses, but I also want to read my Joseph Smith quote first, because I think this goes in line. Joseph Smith taught in the King Follett sermon about how we were not created by God, we were organized, and that we need to go forward and become like God. In this quote from Discourse 7 on April 14, 1844, page 116, he says, "You have got to learn how to become gods yourself, to be kings and to be priests to God, the same as all gods have done, by going from a small degree to another, from grace to grace, from exaltation to exaltation, until you are able to sit in glory, as doth those who sit enthroned in everlasting power." So this to me just illustrates how we have to become like God. That is the whole point of everything that we're doing. And it talks about grace to grace, exaltation to exaltation. It is growth that we are always going to be having to become like Him. Let's go over my Doctrine and Covenants quotes. I love these ones the most, and I want to spend the most time on them, but I'm going to skip over the majority of what I have. Let's start with Doctrine and Covenants 93, and in verse 28 it says, "He that keepeth his commandments receiveth truth and light, until he is glorified in truth and knoweth all things. Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made. Neither indeed can be. All truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it, to act for itself, as all intelligence also, otherwise there is no existence." And then if we skip down to 36, "The glory of God is intelligence, or in other words, light and truth." So God receives His intelligence, or His light and His truth, from His righteousness. And we learn that intelligence is eternal, that it's not something that God just whipped out of His hat. It's something that was there and that He took and arranged. He arranged us from some form or lower form of intelligence. In Doctrine and Covenants 132, we'll read verse 17. It says, "For these angels did not abide my law, therefore they cannot be enlarged, but remain separately and singly without exaltation. In their saved condition to all eternity, and from henceforth are not gods, but are angels of God forever and ever." So saying that angels cannot be like God. And if we drop down to 37, it's talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says, because they did not no other thing than that which they were commanded, they have entered into exaltation, according to the promises, and sit upon thrones, and are not angels, but are gods. So we can see that exaltation literally means that we become like God. And we learn that God was like us before. He was a man, and he went through the plan of salvation. And so we can understand, my concepts are, one, that, let me just make sure I've got them right here. God was like us. He was not exalted, but he progressed through that plan. And he received glory by righteousness and now rules and reigns in righteousness. My second concept is we existed before this life, maybe not in the exact same form, but we had a premortal life. And God has been helping us to get to where we are. No matter how trivial our life is, may seem, we have the ability to raise to a greater form and be exalted just like God is. So my key takeaway is we are so much more than what we see in ourselves. No matter how insufficient our actions or life may seem, we are eternal beings. We have come from a lower form and we have existed for eternity. And we can follow the footsteps of God as well as our Savior, and we can be like them. We can be kings, rulers, creators, healers, and be clothed in glory and righteousness. And we do this by righteousness, by being obedient. And we don't need to be discouraged by our shortcomings because we can do what's right. Okay, thanks. I got out of time.